Welcome back, everyone. So here we are again, and we're moving straight on now to focus on another key frequency band in the mid-band range. So we've looked at the C-band, we've looked at the 6 gigahertz. Now we're going to have a look in detail at the CBRS ecosystem. So really looking forward to this. Got an excellent lineup of panelists for this session again. And it's my honor now to welcome to the stage our moderator for the session. That's Rhys Robinson from ATTI. So Rhys, welcome. Great to have you with us. And as I said, really looking forward to this panel. So I'll pass quickly over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dan. Thanks to Dan Jordan in the background and to Forum Global for organizing this. And then to my esteemed speaker colleagues in the audience, of course, this should be a pretty interesting session. I'd like to run through the speakers. What are Dave Wright, president of the Ongo Alliance, then Lene McGrath, who's with the CIO office and the DoD, Jennifer McCarthy, vice president of legal advocacy at Federated Wireless, and Colleen King, VP of Regulatory Affairs at an MNO charter. So I'd like to jump right in, Dave.
Great. Yeah, thank you very much, Rhys. I appreciate the opportunity. I was here yesterday for the private networks panel, and it's great to be back to speak on the CBRS panel for those of you who might have missed that private network session. The Ongo Alliance, which I'm the president of, is, well, until January of this year, was known as the CBRS Alliance. We are one of the industry organizations focused on the commercialization and market awareness of the CBRS band and LTE and 5G solutions in the band, which we have now branded Ongo. And we reflagged or rebranded the Alliance with the support of our membership back in January to now have a global remit for 3GPP technologies in shared spectrum bands globally. So we're now looking at LTE and 5G operations in shared or locally licensed bands really around the world. Our focus has been on the CBRS band in the US, and obviously that's the focus of this session. Instead of slides or anything, I went through some slides yesterday that kind of gave some backstory on CBRS, so you can always refer to that session if you don't have the background. But I thought, sort of being I'm going to use some U.S. analogies here, so sorry to the international guests, but to use a baseball analogy, we're sort of batting almost cleanup. We're not quite at the bottom of the order, but we're close to it. So I thought I'd just reflect on a few of the things that I have heard in the last day and a half of the conference. I think it's been an excellent conference, by the way, as Dan and Jordan and Forum Global always do. It's been a fitting 10th year anniversary event for the Americas event. And there's been a lot of good presentations by a lot of very compelling speakers. So some of the things that I have noted is there's been a general trend, to hold up CBRS as a poster child of success in spectrum management, and that is wonderful. I certainly agree with that praise that we've received, or that the band has received. We heard from Acting Chairwoman Rosenworcel, the Acting Chief Counsel at the FCC, Umair Javed, Ethan Lucarelli from the Chairwoman's Office, Derek Lopin, Charles Cooper from the NTIA, and then a number of our users, including a couple of speakers from Verizon, Patrick Walsh yesterday, and then Rachel Bender earlier today. And they all basically were singing the praises again of CBRS, that this framework, this novel framework that the FCC put forward starting back in 2014 timeframe, and really going back prior to that to NTIA's work in 2012, and then the President's Council of Advisors in Science and Technology report back in 2010, if you want to take it all the way back to that point. To be here 11 years later from the PCAST report anyways, and have, the most successful small cell band in history in terms of the number of deployments, the diversity of deployments. It's quite an accomplishment. So I echo all the praise that has been received. It's very gratifying from my perspective to be here this year, and I don't think I've heard a single person refer to CBRS as an experiment. That was the case for quite a while, where people, this experiment of CBRS, we're well past the experimentation phase. This has been proven out. The deployments are quite real. They're across a range of use cases, like I talked about yesterday, and we're very grateful for that. Some of the other things I think are worth, kind of mentioning in an introduction to the panel discussion. The importance of 5G. 5G has been a pretty consistent theme for this conference. And so the importance of 5G and CBRS. CBRS was the first mid-band spectrum in the United States that was opened up for 5G services. First at the GAA tier, and then with the auction of the priority access licenses last August, September, for exclusive use as well. So, we are extremely excited about the existing infrastructure support for 5G NR, and many of the infrastructure, small cell devices, small cell radios that have been manufactured and then sold into the band, deployed in the band, do support NR operation. What we're now starting to see is a rapid introduction of client support for the N48 band, and N48 is the 3GPP band designation for NR operation in CBRS. So we're very gratified by that. The iPhone 13 introduction recently here with N48 support was significant. So I think that will be something that we'll be monitoring closely, and we'll see ramping pretty significantly over the next year. And if we're back next year, we can give you an update on 5G deployments. We've got new neighbors, as a band. We've got the C band coming online, so we had a great panel discussion on that this morning. So we've got the C band services being deployed now. I know we're not going to talk about it because we're in a quiet period, but there's an auction of the frequencies directly below CBRS going on as we speak. So the 3.45 service is being auctioned. Both of those are higher power bands than CBRS. There's a comment this morning about how the C-band auction raised the most proceeds in the FCC's history, $81 billion, not including the accelerated clearing costs. Certainly agree with that, and how that was very attractive to the mobile network operators. But if we look at the PAL auction, it was also hugely successful. So this is the auction of the up to 7 PAL licenses per county across the country that was held last August, September. By participation, that was the most successful auction in the FCC's history, and 228 different entities were awarded PAL licenses. So the variety of types of entities that got those licenses, from the mobile operators to the cable operators, to utility companies, private enterprises, universities, wireless internet service providers, agricultural players. It really was, I think, a testament to the diversity of the use cases supported by CBRS. So huge success there. A few other points that I'd note have come up during the conference on this morning's panel. I think it was the C-band as well. Somebody asked about, what do you see, spectrum requirements being in 10 years? Is there going to be enough mid-band for IMT or 5G or 6G, I guess, for the next 10 years? And I think pretty much every panelist said, well, it's hard to predict. So I think one of the things that's nice about CBRS is it provides a tremendous amount of flexibility. It allows for both exclusive use at the PAL tier, the permissive use at the GA tier, and the ability to rebalance the band over time. So it doesn't require the policymaker or the regulator to be Nostradamus. So those are a few things I've noted. I'm sure we'll get to some more during the discussion, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Dan. Now, Lene, please.
Thanks, Reese, and thank you to Global Forum for inviting me to sit on today's panel. My name is Lene McGrath, and I'm a senior analyst within the Department of Defense's Office of the Chief Information Officer in its Spectrum Policy and Programs Directorate. As a part of my portfolio of responsibilities, I lead spectrum repurposing activities for the DoD, including the CBRS Band. The topic of today's panel is very timely. DoD is committed to advancing spectrum sharing technologies and frameworks that benefit our own missions while supporting important national priorities, including 5G leadership and nationwide rollout of high-speed broadband. We all know that the demand for spectrum has never been greater and is not slowing down. New technologies, services, and applications are emerging every day that fuel the demand for spectrum. The last 18 months, while we have all dealt with this global pandemic, have highlighted our continuing dependence on wireless communications in all facets of life. How many of you currently watching this panel via wireless connection? I'm pretty sure it's the vast majority of us. From Wi-Fi to LTE to 5G, we all rely on mobile broadband to do our jobs, stay in contact with loved ones, keep ourselves entertained, and make a life a little bit easier. I, for one, do not want to have to go back to being tied to an Ethernet cable to be able to, instead of being able to work from wherever I want in my house. I think all of us have spent at least one beautiful sunny afternoon working outside since last March, all thanks to mobile broadband technologies. Every day, innovators are creating new technologies and applications that improve the quality of our life. All these depend on the availability of spectrum to make that happen. At the same time, DoD spectrum access requirements also continue to grow. Because we are a mobile force, DoD is dependent on spectrum access to perform its national security missions. Our adversaries are growing more sophisticated and deploying systems designed to undermine our own. As a consequence, DoD must look to revolutionary, leap-ahead technologies and capabilities to maintain our technological advantage. While I personally hope we never need to deploy these technologies here in the US, DoD must still conduct regular training and testing activities, both here in the US and with our allies overseas in joint exercises. As our systems continue to grow in complexity, the spectrum required to both operate and gather testing and training data increases. Flexible access frameworks and policies are needed to ensure DoD maintains its operational superiority within the spectrum. However, as we're all aware, the amount of spectrum available continues to remain fixed, while the demand for both commercial and DoD uses grows by leaps and bounds. Until someone figures out how to create new spectrum, we're going to need to figure out how to more smartly access spectrum to meet the rising demands of all users. To me, that means we need to figure out spectrum sharing. I do believe the CBRS Band is a success story in spectrum sharing. As we speak, DoD shipboard radars and commercial devices are simultaneously operating in the 3.55 gigahertz band without harmful interference. DoD is able to continue to use the band to meet its missions, while a vast plethora of commercial users help drive US technology leadership. The number and variety of commercial use cases in this band is simply staggering. Additionally, the development of the CBRS sharing framework highlights the possibilities when federal regulators, federal agencies, and industry stakeholders come together to find win-win solutions that meet everyone's needs. That collaboration built trust between the different stakeholders and helped build the foundation for a successful implementation. I believe the past year has demonstrated the success of the CBRS sharing framework. We at DoD look forward to continuing to work with the CBRS community to further expand the success of the sharing framework. Lessons learned from our work in CBRS will inform how we can optimize future sharing frameworks. Some of the foundations we have laid in making CBRS a success will serve the nation well as we embark on even harder sharing challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Lene. That was very good. I look forward to us all coming together to help DoD. So, Jennifer McCarthy, please, Federated Wireless.
Thanks, Reese, and thank you to Forum Global for inviting Federated Wireless and me back to join you for this 10th annual conference. Very excited to be here. And thank you to the FCC, NTIA, and DoD for their collaboration with the CBRS community to make such a successful band. As Dave said just a few minutes ago, this is no longer an experiment. We have a very successful band demonstrating the capabilities of shared spectrum technology, cloud-based centralized sharing solutions, and are paving the way for the introduction of a wide variety of new broadband services in this frequency range. And we look forward to expanding this concept of combining both licensed and lightly licensed opportunities for different access options in other bands, possibly including additional lower 3 gigahertz spectrum. So you may know Federated Wireless. We are one of the certified spectrum access system administrators for the CBRS band. We are also a prospective automated frequency coordinator for the 6 gigahertz band, which was discussed on the last panel. So we're very excited that the technology that we've been able to demonstrate successfully here in CBRS for the past year and a half can be leveraged for other bands. 6 gigahertz is going to be one of the first ones. And as Mark Gibson mentioned earlier, it's not exactly the same capability as the SAS, which has a lot additional complexity built into it that's necessary for the specific incumbents that are in the 3.5 gigahertz band here in the United States. But the basic concept of the sharing mechanisms and the way we're doing computations in real time to enable sharing of this band amongst different services. It's really the same basic capabilities, simplified or adapted for different frequency bands and different incumbent users and new use cases as well. In commenting on that, one of the things I think that people tend to do is to think that CBRS is too complicated for other countries to consider. And again, I'd like to reemphasize the fact that the CBRS sharing framework was specifically designed for a very complex set of incumbencies and sharing approaches. But given that the technology is band agnostic and can be applied to different sharing scenarios, I think regulators around the world should really consider how they can implement the parts of the CBRS success story in their countries and in the bands, and to address the challenges that they're facing, whether that's sharing with satellite services, with other terrestrial systems, with military systems, even possibly. So the basic capabilities are there, the building blocks, and we can take the parts of them that are necessary to enable sharing of different frequency bands for the primary purpose of making sure that that spectrum is used as efficiently as possible. But the other major component of CBRS that I think people might overlook or tend to downplay is the combination of having licensed access and unlicensed access available in the same frequency band, subject to equipment interoperability requirements, along with the use it or share it opportunistic capabilities that the FCC has enabled through their rules. That we really think is the magic. It's important to make efficient use of every band, but it's also equally important to make sure that you are opening frequencies to as many different users and use cases as possible. And in the CBRS band, in the year and a half plus that we've been operating, we now are at over 180,000 base stations deployed commercially. And that is an amazing success that we'd like to tout. We've got over 40 vendors supplying equipment for this band and hundreds of different users, whether it's the 228 PAL licensees that Dave mentioned, unprecedented number of licensees who won priority access licenses in the auction, or whether it is the hundreds of new users who are accessing the GAA, the General Authorized Access tier, on an opportunistic basis for a wide variety of use cases and applications. from utilities to smart warehouse projects, to education, to healthcare. Private wireless opportunities abound. And the same GAA spectrum is also being taken advantage of by the MNOs and other large public network operators. And that combination, I think, is really important. Recognizing that in order for a band to be successful, you want to make sure that you're bringing the larger operators in, which will help drive the ecosystem development and expansion, but also making sure that you're giving opportunities for as many other new users to use the frequencies as possible. And this combination together in the same frequency band, I think, is really the secret sauce of CBRS, and one that we should be looking to replicate in as many other frequency bands as possible. And with that, look forward to our ongoing discussion with the other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. That was very good. I'd like to now introduce Colleen King of MNO Charter Communications. And Colleen, take it away.
Thanks very much, Reese, from Charter. Not quite an MNO yet, but an MSO. But thanks very much to Forum Global for inviting Charter to participate on this panel. As a cable company, it's always exciting to be invited to attend and participate in Spectrum conferences. But wanted to start with a little background about Charter. Charter is more than a cable company. We're a connectivity company. We serve more than 31 million customers in 41 states under the brand name Spectrum. Over our advanced communications network, we offer a full range of state-of-the-art broadband internet, video, voice, and mobile services. From 2016 to 2020 alone, Charter invested nearly $40 billion in infrastructure and technology to extend our network, including we recently announced a $5 billion investment that will connect an FCC estimated 1 million currently unserved, mostly rural homes and small businesses to reliable high-speed broadband services at speeds up to 1 gigabit per second. So Charter has invested and continues to invest these billions of dollars in fiber and densifying our networks, in part to offer some of the fastest broadband speeds in the market, but also in part to prepare for the bandwidth demands of the next generation technologies like 5G. The Internet of Things and advanced video and virtual reality applications that individuals and communities want depend on combining ultra-fast Wi-Fi with innovative wireless technologies like 5G. Those are all powered by a robust, high-capacity, high-compute, low-latency broadband infrastructure. So we think Charter is well-positioned as a company to use our advanced high-speed network to deploy a converged 5G and other next-generation wireless technologies. But back to the wireless, we've long been a wireless company, serving as many as 80% of wireless traffic in the home and office with our Wi-Fi service, with over 450 million wireless devices attaching to our network. But in July 2018, we began offering Spectrum Mobile to customers as an MVNO, partnering with Verizon Wireless and combining with Charter's extensive Wi-Fi infrastructure. Today, Charter is one of the country's fastest growing mobile providers with nearly 3 million customer lines. And so we continue to innovate and develop our mobile services and products. We emphasize an inside-out strategy, first focusing on wireless solutions inside the home and then strategically using outdoor infrastructure. Our focus is to increase the quality of overall customer connectivity experience and offer mobile service that is a better value and lower cost, while enabling us to continue to drive customer growth and penetration. Just in fact, this week we announced pricing starting at $29.99 a month per line for customers with at least 2 Spectrum mobile lines, which is a potential savings of up to 60% off customers' existing wireless bill. So we think bringing competition is great to serve our customers. But wanted to now bring CBRS into the discussion, the topic of this panel. CBRS is very important to our mobile strategy. We are excited to participate in the FCC's first auction of new 5G mid-band spectrum, winning 210 licenses in 106 counties across the country. Dave and Lene and Jennifer have all mentioned this, but the structure of the CBRS auction with county-sized licenses, lower power operation, and the innovative sharing regime attracted competitive new entrants like Charter with footprints that are smaller than the nationwide footprints of the largest wireless carriers, who also continue to participate in this band. we think that the resounding success of CBRS exemplifies how the FCC, working with other government agencies in developing innovative rules, can bring a diverse set of providers to the table and enable a new variety of services and technologies for consumers. So Charter is starting our CBRS operations with an employee field trial. We use both our licensed spectrum that I mentioned and also the GAA spectrum. We'll launch this trial in one market to ensure that the service is working as planned, and then we'll use that learning as we proceed with other deployments in other markets. We have power right of way and fiber in all markets in which we won spectrum, so we're well positioned to efficiently deploy a small cell network using both our PAL and GAA spectrum. And again, I do appreciate being on a panel with these CBRS experts and look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Colleen. I think we'll have some good questions here too. And I guess the first one from the audience, some have been coming in, is that what do you think the arguments are for the current power limits in the CBRS band? And what do you think should consequently be done, or the approach? Anyone, any speaker?
Well, I'm happy to just to take this one first. Charter has looked at this really carefully, so we do have pretty big thoughts on this and this possibility. It was raised earlier this year, I think, or maybe late last year, by a few providers to consider raising the power levels, and we had our technical folks take a really careful look at it, and we, after looking at it, we are opposed to this change, which we think would stifle innovation and undermine the diversity and competition in this band. We think that the lower power was part of the key attributes that created this band. We've all talked about the success of the band, the diversity of providers, and use cases that they're using right now. And that was kind of developed based on, the FCC looked at this very carefully. They considered previously rejected proposals for higher power limits. They found that lower power enabled a more efficient use of the spectrum, allowing greater spatial reuse of the band, reducing coexistence challenges, and increasing network capacity. And so, the users of the band right now have planned and deployed their networks based on the existing rules. And we think that changing the rules would often undermine and create interference for those use cases. I'll mention that the proponents of changing the power limits have suggested that with this ask that you can confirm that there will be no interference to those who don't change. But again, based on our analysis, we don't think that they've looked at all of the different forms of interference that can occur. We think that our existing PALs, we think, would be impacted as we continue to operate at the lower power levels that we kind of planned our network around. And we think also that raising power levels will reduce the amount of available GAA spectrum. As the PALs have to work to protect the higher power operations, there's going to be a reduction in the amount of GAA spectrum available. So we just think that changing this now is really going to turn this from this innovative band that the FCC and working with NTI and DoD has created, and turn it into a more traditional wireless band, which would undermine a lot of the work of innovative work that's gone into this. So we've again, after looking at it, we're against changing any power levels.
And go ahead, Jennifer, please.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, and Dave, we understand very well Colleen's concerns and Charter's concerns about higher power levels, particularly the potential impact to make GAA coexistence more complicated. But we do think that, particularly with the PALs, that we can allow higher power levels in the PALs without impacting PAL-to-PAL coexistence and coordination, or impacting DoD operations. I think one issue that Colleen touched on that could be interesting is whether or not the reduction of opportunistic access of unused PAL spectrum definitely would be reduced if people started using higher power levels within their PAL protection areas. But I'm not sure from a policy perspective if that should be the primary concern. I think making sure that GAA maintains the the opportunistic access and ensuring that as many users of that spectrum can get access to the spectrum as possible is an important policy goal and one that we should continue to support. And I wonder if there's a halfway approach that could work here, where perhaps PALs are given the opportunity to raise their power levels, and in certain circumstances in GAA spectrum, for instance, in more rural areas where there are fewer competing users trying to access the spectrum. And I feel like we as an industry can probably come up with some rules of the road to make sure that we're not destroying the beauty of CBRS and GAA in particular, and don't ruin the commons.
If I could just, sorry.
I'm sure Dave Wright's got some really astute comments here.
Well, it sounds like Colleen wanted to go back. I'm happy to wait.
Okay. Colleen?
Oh, sorry. I think I just wanted to raise one issue that our technical folks would get mad at me if I didn't raise, which is we agree on the GAA front. We are concerned, though, just that it would cause interference to our lower power PALs. So we do have concerns that although the SAS can protect us from co-channel interference, which is operations on the same frequencies, we worry about adjacent channel interference. And we think that often to overcome an increase in interference from a nearby higher power base station, small cell networks would have to increase their own transmit power levels, which they can't do if they weren't kind of designed to do that. So with the adjacent channel interference, we have concerns that it would produce small cell networks effective coverage and service throughput. So again, just, as we continue to work through these issues, that's, Charter's concern about raising that we have concerns about GAA, but also the protection of the PALs that we want at auction.
Yeah, Reese, I was just going to weigh in to say, from an alliance perspective, we certainly don't have a position on this power level question. I think Colleen did a nice job sort of giving some of the historical perspective. It certainly came up prior to the rulemaking, and it's come up a few times since the third R&O was issued, and we got the final rules and the commercial authorization in the band. Commissioner Carr included higher power in CBRS and his spectrum roadmap kind of platform of issues that he released earlier in the year as well, that the commission ought to consult on it. So it's an issue that is out there. The alliance, we have members on all sides of that issue, I would say. So we wouldn't take a position. A couple of things I would note, though. I think it was Charles Cooper yesterday from NTIA talked about the work that NTIA is doing around this incumbent informing capability. And then Patrick Welsh from Verizon, when he was speaking, I think that was yesterday as well, he noted that while the protection of the federal incumbents, and hopefully Lene will back me up on this, is working extremely well in CBRS. To my knowledge, we've had no reports of harmful interference to the federal incumbent operations, which is a huge testament to all the work and all the collaboration that went on between industry and DoD and NTIA and the commission, to make that possible. But Patrick was pointing out that one of the side effects of sensing in the band to protect the federal incumbents is it creates some inefficiencies in how we can utilize the band in proximity to those sensors, and that's really the kind of impetus for looking at an IIC system, both in the 3.45 service as well as potentially in the CBRS service, as a longer term way of doing the federal protections, because then we could make a little bit more intense use, particularly along the coasts of the spectrum. So the reason I brought that up is if you talk about a category C or a category D class of CBSD, which is the base stations in CBRS. So today, category B is limited to 50 watts. So if you talk about going up to 150 watts or 500 watts or whatever the category C and D proposals are, that will have even, there will be implications for how we protect those ESC sensors from those higher power operations. So that's one thing to consider, and I'd be curious what Lene might have to say about that. I think it also speaks to, the question that was raised on, I think it was the C-band panel earlier today, where first in the Canadian context and then in the US context, there was a conversation just about the broader, call it the 3 gigahertz range, right? From, all the way down to 3.1 to 4.2, really. And how, in the US, just sort of because of how we've been able to tackle this in pieces over time and the different incumbencies and different situations and different subbands, we're ending up with a higher power service at the top of the band in 3.7 to 3.98, a low power service from 3.55 to 3.7 with CBRS, and then a high power service in 3.45 to 3.55, and then potentially a low power in 3.100 to 3.450. We'll have to see what comes out of some of the current discussions around 3.100 to 3.450. But we've got a little bit of a patchwork as sort of how it's ending up: low power, high power, low power, high power. And that does create some complexities at the band edges. So to some of the points that I think Jennifer and Colleen made, again, without taking a position on it, I'd point people to an interesting paper that John Leibovitz, who is very integral to the whole formulation of CBRS back in the 2015 timeframe at the commission, and then Ruth Milkman, also from the commission. They wrote a paper that was released about a month ago, sort of policy implications of spectrum sharing. And the latter part of that paper kind of is a rationalization proposal for the 3 gigahertz band. And again, I can't say that it's a good approach, bad approach, and different approach, but it raises some interesting questions about grouping high power uses and low power uses and trying to kind of segregate those to either end or spectrum, either end of the spectrum, if you will. And I think that's what I heard from one of the gentlemen speaking on the C-band panel about the Canadian 3 gigahertz situation as well. Maybe put some of the low power uses at either end and concentrate the high power uses in the middle. So I think I think it's interesting to think about that from a policymaking perspective, both for the U.S. case as well as the international cases.
So I will. Yeah, so I will confirm with Dave, as far as we are aware, we have not received any reports of interference to DoD operations. So from our perspective, the CBRS framework has been incredibly successful. On the power limits, that's not really our fight. It's one of them of, if there's an interest to move forward, DoD stands ready to work with NTIA and FCC as a part of those discussions. But I think that's a discussion for the regulators to have and not DoD.
Now, we've heard that the CBRS model is going to be used for the 6 gigahertz band, and I'm wondering what people generally feel about that. And it's great to hear that Jennifer thought it would be a good model to be used for other bands. But what do you think?
I think that might have been a reference to my discussion of the spectrum sharing technology building blocks and its applicability to other sharing scenarios, such as what we're doing with the AFC and 6 gigahertz, and how a lot of the lessons we've learned in the same technology and capabilities can be applied to other bands and other sharing capabilities. But looking more specifically at the CBRS model, where we're putting both licensed and unlicensed in the same band, subject to the same technical rules, basically, and same service rules, I do think there are opportunities for that to be replicated in other parts of the world. I know Europe is contemplating whether the 3.8 to 4.2 band could be a good place to introduce that sort of sharing capability, using with the fixed satellite service as the incumbents, and then possibly a tiered approach with some licensed spectrum access options and some unlicensed options. And I know the UK obviously has moved forward with its shared access licenses for that band. So we look forward to figuring out how we can help effectuate a similar sharing scheme to CBRS in 3.8 to 4.2 and maybe other bands, as different regions consider what might be appropriate for them, and individual countries obviously as well.
Now, there's also a international component or perspective here, and Dan might have a good view on that, but everyone else might too. So.
Yeah, Reese, I would jump in on that. I mean, I would just on the 6 gigahertz AFC component. I would just point out that Ira Keltz on the previous 6 gigahertz panel, he was directing people more towards the TV white space. Database coordination is a better analog to the AFC and 6 gigahertz than the SAS, and I would agree with that. Not in my Ongo capacity, but in my day job with Hewlett Packard Enterprise, where we're very invested in 6 gigahertz. The SAS is real time. It's very capable in terms of the modeling that it can do. It has to protect the federal incumbents with the ESC system, et cetera, et cetera. So there's complexity that comes along with that, which is not the case with the AFC and 6 gigahertz. To your question on international applications, I think Jennifer just mentioned 38-42 Ofcom in the UK when they opened up their shared local access licensing scheme or regime, I should say, for low power and medium power licenses in 38-42. They did it initially with a manual coordination approach, but they asked for a lot of industry input on dynamic database coordination going forward. They asked for the alliance to provide inputs. They asked the company I was with at the time to provide inputs to that consultation. So we certainly pointed them to the work of the Wireless Innovation Forum and the work of the Ongo Alliance to say, yes, the framework for sharing and database coordination might be different in the UK than it is in the US. You have different incumbencies and whatnot, but if we can reutilize some of, if nothing else, the protocol interfaces and the messaging formats that we use between the base stations and the databases, that in and of itself would be a significant advantage for industry. To reuse that framework to the extent possible and tweak the parameters, for the specific instantiation in the country. Saudi Arabia has recently consulted on private and local licensing in the 4 to 4.2 gigahertz range. And again, they're indicating that they're willing to consider sort of database dynamic coordination as a longer term solution there. And to my mind, a lot of the countries that are opening up the private and local spectrum for private and local uses or vertical uses, you'll hear them say, I think that at a certain point as that scales, database coordination will help facilitate that, will help facilitate more intensive use. I said yesterday on the private networks panel, it's going to depend, in some places manual coordination may be fine, even longer term. But I do think that in many instances, you're going to see that dynamic database coordination does prove more capable of providing the most intense, efficient use of a spectrum band. And as we've proven here in the U.S., it's not rocket science, and it can be replicated elsewhere.
To that point, if I may add to what Dave just said, I think the scale of the automation is also really important. I think Ofcom has seen a lot of success with its manual approach so far. I think it's had a couple of hundred new licensees apply for shared access. But if you compare that to the hundreds of thousands of CBSDs that are in operation today in the CBRS band, I think that there's a bit of a scale issue when it comes to automating this capability, and would definitely recommend that that regulators explore that that issue, knowing that manual approaches have worked in the past and they can continue to work, but that you're really going to have a massive growth impact from the automation of the spectrum access.
Now, how about extending CBRS into rural areas where maybe there's not even LTE coverage? Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, this is Colleen, and I mean we've definitely we're focused right on our mobile small cell deployment, but we definitely looked into it. And I think if you look and Jennifer and Dave can speak more to this, but I mean the use cases of people who are using this spectrum in rural areas to provide fixed wireless services. We've actually done a lot of testing of that to kind of expand the cable network. But it's spectrum that it has with the the rules that the FCC has created that allow a lot of operators into the band. I think another big issue to raise that the FCC did, which we think is great, is the county size licenses. This lets, a smaller provider in a rural area afford to get, spectrum in areas that they want to cover. Bigger service areas make it harder for some of these smaller rural providers to justify a business case to buy a whole PEA or even larger. Whereas if you have smaller license sizes that were, developed in CBRS, the county size licenses, we think that's been great for encouraging the smaller, rural providers to get access to the spectrum, and they can provide, services in these rural areas.
I guess importantly too, I'd like to mention this. Go ahead, Dave.
I'm sorry, Reese. I was just going to say, rural fixed broadband is actually one of the leading uses of CBRS. So it's definitely happening, and it's happening at scale. One of the incumbent services at the upper 50 megahertz of the band was Part 90, fixed wireless. So very widely used by wireless internet service providers in the country, and with CBRS, they've now got the ability not just to address 50 megahertz, but 150 megahertz of spectrum, the GA tier in particular, and to move to LTE standardized equipment, which the economies of LTE are favorable just because of the market for LTE chipsets, et cetera. So the WISPs are very active in CBRS, and then Charter and AT&T and others have talked about using CBRS fixed services to extend the reach of their existing broadband, whether it's fiber or fiber coax networks. So that's a very prevalent use for providers of all size, the very large national providers, and then the very small regional providers, and so very popular use.
I'd like to mention, once we get to 5G standalone, will I be able to operate within the CBS parameters?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I was talking earlier about how we're excited about the recent introduction of more 5G NR capable clients supporting N48, so the CBRS band. And today most of that's NSA, although I think Qualcomm and Ericsson not too long ago did a demonstration of CBRS standalone mode, and they were actually placing some voice traffic over the network, so that was an important demonstration. But from a 5G network architecture perspective, whether you're using a 4G LTE EPC core, or you're using an actual 5GC 5G core, the spectrum access portion of the RAN is somewhat transparent. So yes, either NSA or SA works fine. I think SA is going to be important for some of the precision manufacturing type use cases where both the latency as well as the slicing capabilities of 5G SA really come into play and give you some great benefits.
And then the last question just came in. How's the mix of CBRS on macro versus small cell going these days? Any of the panelists?
Yeah, the second part of that question is about whether or not this spectrum is being used for capacity offload for the large telcos.
Right.
And I think Patrick mentioned it yesterday, that absolutely, CBRS is part of their, that's part of their portfolio, adding additional capacity anyway. To their existing network. And then you've got a lot of small cell deployments, private wireless in particular, using small cells for, for indoor and campus-wide private networks. And Lene, maybe I'll bring you back into this conversation. I know DoD is one of the first large users of CBRS spectrum for private wireless networks with the Albany, Georgia Smart Warehouse system. And I love the full circle nature of the CBRS sharing scheme, where we've got a military, primary allocation that's being protected, and then that same military can use the spectrum and leverage the large commercial ecosystem that's developed, and all the technology and applications that come along with it to improve operations on bases. And I know there are a lot of other military agencies that are considering doing something similar.
Yep, as you pointed out astutely, Jennifer, one of our 5G pilots for DoD is utilizing the CBRS band. So when we say there's a plethora of use cases, we happen to be one of them.
And then Colleen, is the CBRS band enough for charters offload needs? And how much of GA do you expect to be able to use?
Yeah, so we're pretty happy with the investment we've been making in the CBRS band. We do plan to use both the PAL, the licenses that we acquired, and we plan to combine them with GAA. It's one of the reasons that it's important to us to make sure that the technical rules protect both the PALs and GA spectrum for our deployment. And I'll note that we're happy with that. We are as we're looking forward. One thing that we've talked about is other spectrum bands, and I think Jennifer mentioned this. There's other spectrum bands in the U.S. in mid-band we think that would be good to look at for a CBRS-like sharing regime. The 3.1 to 3.45 band. We think that a CBRS regime would be great to help protect federal incumbents in that band. We understand there's even more federal incumbents in that band, so clearing it might be pretty difficult. And so we think an efficient, way to get spectrum that can be both protected for the federal incumbents, but then usable by CBRS, all the people who are using CBRS now. A lot of them, it would be great if they had other spectrum opportunities. So we see that band as a great possibility to look at for CBRS type rules.
Good, thank you. Would anyone else like to provide a final summary? Dave, you're always good at this.
Uh-oh, I think that means I talk too much.
Overview.
Yeah, I mean, just back on the subject of the importance of international harmonization. I think we've heard that sort of consistently through the conference, and I would certainly echo that. I was talking yesterday on the private networks panel about, excuse me, sort of the emergence of the N77. So I'll call it 355 or 3.4 really if I go to Europe. The 3.4 to 4 gigahertz range is really emerging for a lot of sort of localized uses. Kind of looping back to that question somebody asked about macro. I don't think of CBRS as a macro band, right? I mean, it's not like C-band or what's been proposed in 3.45. You don't get 3,200 watts per megahertz. You get 5 watts per megahertz with Category B. So the Category B is the higher power option in CBRS, by the way. So it's not a macro band, but it wasn't ever intended as a macro band. And again, we don't have any position on raising the power limits. So if people want to advocate for that, they should. But at this point, it's not a macro band. It's a low power band, and there's a lot of low power uses that are being sort of standardized in this N77 range, as well as N79 in Asia. And that's important because it's really creating this ecosystem of equipment and services and integrators. I mean, having a global business opportunity is hugely important. Creates the scale around the chipsets and then everything that flows from that, the infrastructure, the client devices, the integrators. It's key, and I'm really glad that we're starting to see some common frequencies assigned for these purposes around the world.
I'll just say that I think CBRS has just been a resounding success from DoD's perspective. We have a vibrant commercial ecosystem, but I think one of the big things that came out of this was it demonstrates what happens when the federal regulators, industry, and the federal agencies get together and come up with creative solutions. There was a lot of hard work that went into this. there was a lot of trust and partnerships. And I think the foundation of the work that's been done in CBRS is going to just pay dividends moving forward as we've all worked together very successfully to make this happen.
Final wrap-up question. What would you say are some of the mitigation techniques and resolution solutions that could be used to resolve interference that is not recognized by the SAS in real time?
I'm happy to jump in here real fast on one issue that's pretty key to Charter that I think I know Dave and Jennifer are probably sick of hearing me talk about. And I don't know if you've had to listen to this one yet, but these bands are going to be operated as TDD bands, time division duplex bands. And Charter has concerns that if you don't synchronize these operations, putting uplink with uplink and downlink with downlink, you're going to cause interference, which is going to waste these critical spectrum resources. So we really would like to push for a way to make sure that TDD operations, within these bands and in between bands are synchronized, so that we're not wasting these spectrum. We've done a lot of technical work. There was a kind of an industry working group that showed, where there's not synchronization, you get between 10 and 42% degradation. So again, we think there's no reason to waste this by not synchronizing. We've pushed for FCC rules on it. We think it would be great if the industry could adopt a default that would resolve cases in a large portion of if most people are using kind of an 80 downlink, 20 uplink, configuration. If that was, we could resolve a lot of these issues that create unnecessary interference issues. So as far as one plug I'll put for resolving kind of some of the mitigation techniques, we think that we should continue to push to make sure that this TDD issue is resolved.
Colleen, just maybe continuing on that, what sort of forum do you think that might be accomplished in? A 3GPP environment or an Ongo Alliance type arrangement?
We're happy to work with anybody. We've tried a few different forums. We've had some industry working groups. I know that there's some of the Wind Forum and others are focused on it. We do think that it would be helpful to have the FCC help with this, to make sure that this is resolved. We think that it would help if they could, as a regulator, they can make sure that this is resolved, both to protect, the bigger users who don't want to suffer interference, but in particular for smaller providers and new entrants who kind of have less spectrum resources. Resolving this issue is key, kind of as a policy point, to make sure that they don't lose access to kind of the small amount of spectrum they have to provide service to consumers.
Good. I'd like to, with that in mind, I'd like to thank everyone for your astute comments, and anyone can feel free to follow up offline afterwards if need be. Just go to the Google Drive, and I'll turn it back over to Dan, or I'm sorry, Dave.
Oh no, I was just saying thank you. Sorry.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought you were raising your hand. Dan, here you go.
That was a wave.
Perfect. Look, thank you guys. Thank you all so much. And really, really interesting panel. And I think, Dave, you summed it up at the start, actually, when you mentioned that I think no one at this conference, CBRS has been talked about a lot, and people aren't referring to it as an experiment anymore. And I think just listening to your talk, it's amazing how far you've come, how far it's come, and and it's really interesting to see, with these options in other bands, and looking at other regions around the world. So really, really interesting. So thank you all so much for that. Really do appreciate that. A fantastic panel. So thank you all very, very much. So next up, we have a short break. We have a lunch break for 45 minutes or so. So please do feel free to go and have a break and stretch your legs, maybe get something to eat, and then we're back here again for our next session in 45 minutes at 1:45, which is going to be continuing the look at the mid-band frequencies, maybe stretching things up a little bit higher, looking at the 12 gigahertz band. So we've got a session that's going to be looking at the 12 gigahertz band before we then move on to focus on millimeter, going much higher up the frequency range. And then finally, we're going to be finishing off today with a session that's looking beyond 5G and looking at the next steps towards 6G, I suppose, and beyond. But for now, thank you all so much. Don't forget to check out as well our don't forget to check out, our on-demand session is the word I was looking for. Don't forget to check that one out. So our on-demand session are all available. They're all available to watch now. And we're back here on the main plenary stage in 45 minutes. So I look forward to seeing you all back here then. Thanks very much, everyone.
Hello, this is Tony DiToro with Link Global. We're inviting you to join our showcase session in the on-demand area. Come find out about our satellite constellation, how we're changing the world of connectivity by connecting everyone directly to the mobile phone already in their pocket. You can hear about our excited mobile operator partners and how they look at Link and our connectivity and built-in resiliency for the future.
Over the last 20 years, Wi-Fi has transformed the world. In Wi-Fi Alliance, we have worked diligently to ensure that Wi-Fi democratizes connectivity. This vibrant, energetic community of fans that we have that includes engineers, entrepreneurs, venue owners, operators, policymakers. And with this diversity of community sharing the same interest for Wi-Fi, we can be sure that the next 20 years of Wi-Fi are going to be tremendously exciting.
Hi, my name is Marta Suarez. I am the president of the Dynamic Spectrum Alliance, DSA, and I would like to invite you to attend our showcase about growing global footprint for 6 gigahertz license-exempt access. We are going to have a review about the last updates, and you can participate in the session and watch it on demand and expo area. We will hear about different industry members from the DSA, will tell us about the global momentum, the ecosystem for 6 gigahertz band and license access, and also some updates about the AFC certification process, the automated frequency coordination. So don't hesitate. I'm sure you will have a lot of interesting information, and I hope to see you there. Thank you.
Welcome. I'm Peter Linder from Ericsson. I'm heading up 5G marketing here in North America. I have a session for you about 5 different things that have changed or perspective that we all need to know about 5G, perhaps a little bit different from what you normally see. In order to access these ones, I would like to suggest that you head out to view the showcase in the on-demand and expo area. The on-demand and expo area is where you find the showcase. Thank you very much.
Hi, this is Jennifer McCarthy, Vice President of Legal Advocacy for Federated Wireless. I'd like to thank the Global Forum team for their efforts in pulling the America Spectrum Conference together and invite you to come check out the Federated Wireless Showcase at the On-Demand and Expo area on the website. We are going to be talking with Kurt Schabach, Federated Wireless's CTO, about the power of cloud computing and how it can be leveraged to improve spectrum management for regulators as well as operators in this era of shared spectrum and new opportunities for 5G deployments. Thank you so much and look forward to seeing you there.
Hello, my name is Ari Fitzgerald. I am the practice leader of the Communications, Internet, and Media practice at Hogan Lovells. We have provided for you a video as part of the showcase that focuses on spectrum policy developments in the US and Latin America. I hope you enjoy the video.